Right, what have I got today? Bush. It's a small bush. So this is something small that I picked up, and before I go into the review, I'll tell you why I picked this up. Sometimes old TrailTrek here is at other people's houses and they say, TrailTrek, you know how to fix this, you know all about this, you'll sort this out. And I say, yeah, that's not a problem. And in order to do these little jobs, they hand me what I can only describe as the devil's tools. In other words, they hand me screwdrivers that look like they've been chewed on by Cerberus or stuck into an angle grinder. They're in absolute crap order, and it annoys me using a crap tool to try and do a decent job. And you know what I'm talking about, where you've got heads on screwdrivers and they're stripped to hell and the slip on the fasteners. It's a nightmare. So with that in mind, I thought, what is the smallest thing I can get? Now, obviously, we know that one of the smallest things you can get is stubbies. But if you didn't particularly want a stubby, what other options are there? Now, one of the options that I found was from Wera here, German company. Although I haven't said that, let's have a quick look here. Made in the Czech Republic. Nothing against the Czech Republic, they make some decent tools, but just bear that in mind. This is a German tool, but that is specifically made in the Czech Republic, this KK10 model anyway. So I thought, what about a nice little set that I could get a few of them, stick them in the car, and when I'm at people's houses, I'll say, look, I'm going to throw that rubbish out, keep one of these, they're relatively inexpensive, and the next time I'm around here and you want me to sort something out, hand me that. Anyway, that's the genesis of why I've got this. So I wasn't sent this by Wera or anything like that. Right, on with the review. Sorry for the rant there, but you know what I like? I love a good rant on this channel. Anyway, so this is the Wera Kraftform Kompact 10, and they've shortened that to KK10 here. 10 pieces. It's not, well, it is 10 pieces, but it's not 10 bits. It's 9 bits and one handle, which happens to use a rapidapter. Now the rapidapter, it looks like it's exactly the same rapidapter that you get in all the other Wera tools. I like them. Personally, for me anyway, I prefer a locking bit holder. I know some people say it's rubbish, you don't need that, why don't you just get a normal one like that or a magnetic one? That's more than enough. It can be more than enough, but I'm in the UK here and we use a lot of posi heads. Here's a posi head for people who don't come across them. It's very similar to Phillips, but it has extra blades in the between the cardinal points there, meaning you get less cam out. Now the problem with that is if you use soft and specifically cheaper fasteners, you get what I call bit bite. So what happens is you go, right, brilliant, let's get that screwed in, especially prominent on power tools and impact drivers and things like that. You do the job and then you pull the tool away and that's still stuck in the fastener and you go, and you stick it back in and you go, right, next one. And every single time it happens and it annoys me, especially with impact drivers where you're ramming stuff in. So I prefer a locking bit head. Now, one of the drawbacks of that I realise is that it's more bulk, and sometimes you don't want bulk, you just want the shaft which holds the bit on the driver here, and that's sometimes enough. And especially on the PB Swiss here, this happens to be an example. Most of the PB Swiss models have extremely strong magnets and it's less prevalent, but it can still happen. So I prefer a locking bit holder. So this comes with one of them. Anyway, I'm waffling again. I'll try my best to make this a short review because it's quite a simple little item here. So 9 bits plus handle, which is where they get the 10 from. Now you can see what the bits are. You have a Phillips, and then the posi, you can see it almost looks like a star. It has the little bits between the points there. Torx and a flathead or slotted, depends how you want to call it. And it has the Kraftform ergonomics. Kraftform ergonomics is kind of like, if you were to get they all have their different sort of take on ergonomics. You know, I like the VHR stuff. I find that their compound's very sticky, and that pot, that's almost like a palm swell, and I quite like. And the PB Swiss has the best feeling handles in my personal opinion. I realise there's ball grip drivers and things like that, and yeah, some people prefer that. I do for building PCs, but other jobs where I want a lot more torque, I might use something different. And then you've got, there's that one there, which is kind of a cross between, it's a little bit of, that feels a bit like the VHR, and it's certainly not like the Kraftform stuff. So the Kraftform stuff, I mean, you can go back and look at their history. They're saying it was back in the 60s when they came up with this. They basically, as far as I can see anyway, they got a bit of, Play-Doh and stuck it in their hand and went, there you go, that's about what a handle should look like. And it's kind of stuck. I don't mind this handle, I quite like it. It's comfortable for me and my size, but I'm 6'4", so that may differ for you. And there are different sized handles. So look, straight off there, look, depending on how big your hand is and how big the Kraftform handle is as to how sort of comfortable that's going to be for you. I find these perfectly comfortable. I just wish that there was more stickiness. And when I say that, you have the plastic bit and then this soft bit. So I'll show you, I'll push my thumb in. I wish there was more of that softness, so it became closer to like the PB Swiss, which has an extremely nice compound. I love using those handles, and I realise there are PB Swiss without that though. So, you know, it depends on the size, and I realise I've spoken to many people on the Discord channel and on this comment section on this channel and said, I think they're a load of rubbish. Yeah, okay, I completely get that. I'm not going to argue against you. I get where you're coming from. I've spoken to someone at work who says, oh, I don't like those handles. Yeah, I get it, but I quite like them. So in this regard, you get the Kraftform, but it is very small, and it's in fact, and I've tested it, and I will get in this in a second, it's exactly the same size as the TrailTrek Plus handle, so it's very, very small and compact to keep this very small. So I'll give you a quick look here, blah, 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 rapidapter, yes, you can put all the different bits in, and the lock, and there's the Kraftform ergonomics, and there's a little bit of stuff there, and you can see the bits there. So what do you get here? You get PH1 and 2, so that's Phillips, PZ1 and 2, that's Posi. If I can find it, yeah, Posi, there you go. And you get Torx 10, 15 and 20, and then flathead 0.5 and a 1, or slotted if you want to call them that. And there's all the things in. Wear glasses, wear gloves, you know, don't use it as a chisel and don't use it as a pry. Yeah, well, it's too small anyway. And it is a German tool, but obviously bear in mind this specific model made in the Czech Republic. So enough of that, let's get in and see what you actually get. So now, bear in mind, I'm quite tall, I'm 6'4", so there's my hand. So look at the size of that there. So very small, very compact. It's certainly not credit card size, but it's bigger than that, but that's small. And even width-wise, look at the profile on that. That is easy to put in a big pocket. I've tried it in the skinny jeans. It was less effective unless I put it in a back pocket. So I ended up putting it in like a sort of a wallet jacket pocket on the jacket I was wearing. I think it was a Marmot jacket, that one, and more of a tactical one. So it fits in those sort of pockets and deep pockets, no problem. Because look, it's very, I mean, the protrusion's very small, and then this is very, very, very slim. There's my finger, look. So it's not much more than my finger. Well, it's just less actually there. So it's pretty compact. And then there's a little sticker if you want to stick those around work and annoy people at work. Boosh, get that in the bin. Not interested in that. Right, so what do you actually get here? So let's get a nice close look at this. So you get this sort of like hinge section here, and then you get the tool. Now, if you want to pop it out, you've got to do it from the back. So you can either pop it out from here or here. So poop, and then it pops out. That's it. So look at the size of that, tiny. Now, straight off, you're probably thinking, this is ridiculous. Is this for building dolls' houses? What's going on here? But like I say, look, size-wise, look, obviously ignore the rapidapter on the end there. That's a non-rapidapter. But look, the TrailTrek Plus, which I think is a decent set, same size handle, almost identical there. So there's no difference. They've just stuck a locking mechanism on there. So it is small, and I have used it. And I've used it around the house there. I used the Phillips 2, no, it was a Phillips 1, and the Posi one on the different doors there. It's absolutely fine. I thought, that's never going to work. That's ridiculous. You know, it's going to be like using tweezers, you know, on a little tiny little thing. It was actually all right. I found myself cinching up further than I normally would with a screwdriver. So rather than working here, I was having to really, I mean, look, in order to get, but I was ended up putting finger around there, and then really cinching up against this mechanism. But it worked. And then for fine adjustments, it was just using this swell bit. So it's tiny, but that's one of the drawbacks of getting a really, really compact system. So let's have a look at the bits. How do you get the bits? There's a locking mechanism here. It's semi-locking anyway, so you just force that through. You can see the mechanism there. And then there's the bits. And they are the reduced bottom length. So when I say that, what I mean is, that's what they look like. So they're the minimalist in regards to the bottom anvil, for want of a better word, although that's not the proper anvil. So if you compare that to, so they're the same as, this is a Wera Impactor one. That's for impactors. So exactly the same size. And it is obviously a lot shorter than a standard bit. Quarter-inch bit here, which has, you see the little detent holes there, which normally the ball bearing or whatever the locking mechanism would go into. So I mean, you can obviously use both of these in a magnetic one easy, but see how it comes to there, and on a standard one it would be a bit longer. So if you need those longer ones, bear that in mind. But this rapidapter will accept both, no problem. And then you have a standard anvil there for a power tool. So that's something that you would use in a chuck on a drill or an impact driver into the collet. So it's nothing like that. But again, they are claiming on the website, and I have checked and double checked this, they are saying this is power tool compatible. What they're talking about is, I mean, you might not be able to get that straight into a collet or your chuck with a lot of ease. So what you would do is you would use, I haven't got one to hand, unfortunately, but you would use a bit holder. So the bit holder that you would just put in the chuck, and then you would put the bit into the bit holder. But I would do that in a power tool anyway, unless I was using a specific impact driver. So they are power tool compatible. They don't mention anywhere impact, so I wouldn't use this in an impact driver. I'm guessing that there's a bit of torsion allowed in these heads, but not, you know, absolutely hammering it with a load of rotational force. I personally wouldn't use it in an impact driver, and they're not rated for that, but that's not what this is for. So let's get a nice close look at these bits actually. So I've done this in 4K HDR, 60 frames a second, highest bit rate I can get away with, and all that malarkey. So you can see decent heads, and they are not like what I would call a flat grind. If I get the bigger one, then it's easier. You'll know what I'm talking about. So here's an example on the PB Swiss. You see how it's well, it's not a flat grind or chisel grind. It's ground out. So can you see how they've evacuated material there, and then it then comes to, rather than a point. So I really need a pen. So if I get this, and then I get a piece of paper, there's a bit of paper. So some of the cheap bits I sometimes see, you'll get there's your quarter inch, blah blah blah, and then especially for a flathead, it'll come along and then they'll do that, which it works. But when you look at a fastener, that's not actually, if you look at the cross section of a fastener, they're like that, aren't they? I mean, this is a gross simplification of a screw head, for example, then it goes down. So that will work, but the problem is you're only touching it on a few little bits there, on these 2 points here. Whereas if you actually make it the shape of the slot, which is where the name slotted comes from, obviously, and it fits perfectly, there's a lot more engagement, and it goes down, it touches more of the fastener. And they've done that on this, so it's like a hollow grind from here and here. So nice quality bits here. I can't see any issues with these. I used the smaller one, the 0.5. Where is the 0.5? There it is. I used that one. Let's see if there's any fold over or knurling. Oh, maybe a little bit on that top bit, but I only did about 3 fasteners with this. Yeah, maybe it's a tiny bit, but there's nothing of anything to worry about. And then I used these small Phillips. Let's have a look. PH1, yeah, I used the small Phillips on the doors. Now, I can't see anywhere there any fold over or sort of burr on the leading points there. Perfect. And I'll just say, I mean, I use a lot of the Wera Allen keys. These are the Torx ones, and I've got a lot of hex ones. I've done a hell of a lot of work with them, and one of the things I'll say about the Wera bits is they last. They really do last. They might cost you a little bit more, but they don't just flake away and round off. So pretty good. And I'll get you a nice close-up of the larger one. So there's the large posi. Let's get a nice close look at that in the light there, 4K. So you can see, very, very nice. Quite a bulbous head, then it tapers down. Beautiful. There's no stamping on this, which I normally prefer. I presume that's been burned in with a laser or something. So PZ2, there's the Wera 855, and it is a posi. So I've tried scratching it. It might not be in this one, but I tried scratching with my nail to see if that would come off, because that's something that happens on cheap bits. So I'm putting a lot of force in there. I don't see that coming off at all. Let's try again. No, nothing. So I've had some cheap bits once where they came off, and you end up having to say, is that a posi 1? Is that a posi 2? Right, try it. No, it's the wrong one. Get the next one in. And in regards to quality-wise, they're pretty high up there. I mean, this is a slightly larger bit. This happens to be a PB Swiss posi 3, so bigger. But so for me, the PB Swiss stuff is incredible quality. So pretty good. So there's just a little comparison there, side by side. That to me is like the peak of quality. And Wera, again, decent. Slightly more grippy, the VHR stuff, but they're kind of comparable in a lot of states. So pretty good. And I'll show you how the locking mechanism works. So locking mechanism, you'll see down there, right in the middle, is a single ball bearing with a spring-loaded system. So what happens is you get your bit, and these are the bits that come with, and then they go in. Now, until you push that in, that will not lock, and this outer barrel will move down. So I'll just show you. So I'll push it against my hand. Hear the click? Now that can't come out. So even if I use all my force, and I'll try. No. You can see I've been pushing on hard there. I'm not making fun here. I can't get that out. And then you have to push it up to get it back out, which I like. It's not one of these ones where you push it down. You can knock it down and they come out again. You've got to force it up, boom, now that can come out. See, and it's ready for the next bit. Push, lock. I like the rapidapter. There's a couple of other sort of locking systems that they use. I must get a hold of them and test them, and they're more for impact drivers and things like that, and you can get a slim one and stuff, but some of the prices on them are ridiculous at the minute, so I'll try and get them when I can. So that locks in. So the question is, this rapidapter, does it work with other bits? So here is the extended bit, the is it E6? I forget the names of them now. So you have the detent there, so that detent should work on the ball bearing down there. So let's just see. Obviously push that in. Yeah, I can't get that out, and there's no, look, there is no wobble on that, and there's no in and out, so perfect, really, really good. And then to take it out again, exactly the same, and out. So the question is, does it work with an anvil bit? There's an anvil bit. There's the anvil for a collet or a chuck or whatever you're using. So pop that in. So it should, the ball bearing should lock at that point. So push it in. Yeah. Now there is some in and out. Watch. So I'll hold this steady and not move it, but I'll move this. See the 0 on the 10? Is that going to affect me when I'm working? No, because it's already in and you're pushing against it. There's no further push. And then left and right, let's have a look. Tiny bit, but that's within tolerable levels. I've got no problems with that. That is, I can't get that out. And then pop it up, and it doesn't just fly out and go across the room. Then you just pull that out. Perfect. So let's have a good think about this. So we need to go through some pros and cons, and I'll show you some handles. This was supposed to be a quick review, and it's already over 15 minutes. I do apologise. In regards to other features, they're using the word, you know, torsion with this. I think what they mean is there's a slight bit of give in this steel that they're using. So if you use it in a power system, you'll be all right. And I'm talking about power tools, and with a hand and with such a small handle, I think that would actually be fine. They're saying this has the anti-roll off. The anti-roll off used to be, especially when you have these cutouts here, it's supposed to, if you put that on a table, it's supposed to stop it rolling. Now the only anti-roll mechanism you have is this here. See how we've got a flat, a flat, a flat, a flat. So it works to a bit, but it doesn't just stop immediately. I mean, other manufacturers, the Hazette has the same thing here, and then it has semi cutouts there to stop rolling. There's a few little cutouts on the PB Swiss, and I think the VHR has one as well, but it only has one there and a one there, so it only has two cutouts. So it will roll a bit because that's predominantly round. So they work to a degree, but obviously if you're, you know, at a ship at sea, and it's going to go flying off the table and things like that. But okay, fair enough. That is it. That is a system. That is not like a bolster where you can stick a spanner on or anything like that. Okay, so pros and cons, and then we'll look at some handle sizes. So I'll put it left and right with some other. These just happen to be Wera Kraftform handles as well, and you can see. And there's a stubby. So as you can see, it's bigger than a stubby, and you have to have the bits separate. I mean, in a stubby, you have the bits in here. So you've got to ask yourself, why am I getting this when I could get a stubby? Well, okay, good question. And here's the PB Swiss. I mean, look at the size of that. Bear in mind, you've got to have that. You've got to have both of those together. So if we put that next to that, which would you rather carry? Well, a lot of people would probably rather carry this, but I don't know if that's what this is for. For me, like an EDC solution is a stubby. I really like them, and I've got a couple on my desk. I've got the new Klein Impactor one that I reviewed on the channel, and I have one of those on my desk, which I reach for regularly for looking at bits of machinery and stuff. And I love the PB Swiss one here. Now, would you rather carry this? Are you getting less bits? Is it less capable? It doesn't have the locking head. Are you going to get the same amount of torque? Maybe, maybe not. But then, of course, here's the example I would go for. You've got all of this, which is quite a compact thing with your bits in. So you've got 9 bits and then the bit holder. This has a bit holder with 8 bits, I think it is. But look, the size, you could kind of argue it's half. You're not getting the locking bit, but do you need that on an EDC system? And then the bits are in here in a carousel system. So you've got to ask yourself, how many bits do I need? And is this EDC, or is this something that I'll just have hanging about? For me, I'm going to give this to people, and it's just going to be hanging about the house. So it depends what you're after, and which is probably more applicable to you. So pros, it's power compatible bits, and by that I mean you can use it in a power tool. You can't just stick that straight into a collet, it would drop down. You've got a decent bit selection, you've got 2 Posies, 2 Phillips, your 3 Torques, your 10, your 15 and your 20, and a couple of flatheads. I think it'll probably be less useful if you were in America, where people sometimes send me saying, what's the point in Posie, it's rubbish. You've got Phillips, if you want something that doesn't get camo, why don't you just use Torques? That's a perfectly valid argument. I don't know if I can answer that, other than maybe it's the fact that the adoption of Torques, and correct me if I'm wrong down below, correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't know everything. Maybe the adoption of Torques has been slow in Europe and especially in the UK because we've had Posie and we've relied on it, but Torques is better. You certainly don't get that cam out effect. It depends what you're doing though. I could be wrong again. Down below comments if you think I'm full of it. And it's got the rapidapter lock, which I think's decent. I like this. I don't mind that extra bulk. I mean, there are less bulky options. Here's the Hazat. It's slightly smaller, and you have something like this. This just happens to be on a vessel. What's it called? The Megadora or whatever the hell, non-slip, and it isn't non-slip. This is the 900 ELWC. This looks very similar to me as, and I do have one knocking around somewhere if I can find it. Looks almost like a Centrofix. This isn't technically a Centrofix, but it's an electrostatic version, and it's very similar. But that looks longer to me. So if we compare that, it's a longer locking bit, isn't it? It's not double, but this is sort of 3/4 of that. So there are other methods which are less bulky, but it doesn't bother me. Strangely enough, there's a magnet down there which gives you a super weak, and I'll use their own bits. So there's one of their own bits. Now watch how weak that magnet is. Watch. Now, yes, this is locking, so you think, well, why do you need the magnet? Well, the magnet helps you pick up fasteners. So this is dead light piece of steel. Now it did it before there. It just picks it up. Now bear in mind that's a sim ejection tool. They are dead light. Look, if I give that any there, it comes off. So I'm not sure why they put a magnet in, which is almost useless. Again, comments below. I could be missing something here. I don't know everything. It does come in a small package though. Look, once that's in, boom, I think that's pretty small and compact and neat. Yes, you could argue, well, why don't you just get the PB Swiss 6464? You're getting almost as many bits. Better quality bits. Yeah, it certainly costs a lot more than this. Okay, yeah, true. It's something you need to think about, but you don't get the locking bit holder. That's the thing. So when it comes to the basic cons, I mean, you could argue, well, they're non-standard bits. Well, they're not really non-standard bits because they work in other locking systems and magnetic bit holders, and they're not ultra low capacity. Because I've got now where is it? I think I haven't even reviewed it yet. I've got a thing from Engineer which has really short bits, and the ends of those are tiny, and that's to give you clearance. So it's not in that league. It's certainly in the league with other stuff, and there's an impactor head bit which needs using in a bit holder for Wera there, and they're fine. So it's not like mega small. And the super weak magnet I don't get, but maybe I'm missing something. Okay, so let's get all this out of the way. I need to give this a mark out of 10 instead of waffling. So if we pop them back in, so put that one in there, and then we have a couple of these, so we'll get them in, plop, and then I'm missing a bit. So I like it, and I like Wera, and I think the tools are decent quality. I trust in them, and I think they're a decent piece of kit. So I'm certainly not going to have a go at them on anything to do with quality. Yes, it's a German tool that isn't specifically made in Germany, but what is these days? It's getting outrageous. And I've had many comments from people saying, just so you're aware, tools made in the Czech Republic and Poland and places like that are a decent quality. Okay, so that's the feedback I'm getting from people who actually use these tools. So I'm not going to go, oh no, it's not made in Germany. It isn't, but okay, I think that's in line with what other tool manufacturers are doing at the moment. So I need to give this a mark out of 10 before this review becomes 6 hours long. Do you know what? There was something I thought of which they should have added. Because this is such a small handle, I would have got rid of this logo here, the Wera logo, and I would have put it along there and made it bigger, and I would have put a hole in here where this goes into a certain point, because can you see it swells out, and then I think they should have put a hole in there so you could push that through. So if you imagine it's pushed through, we'll do it there. So if you imagine it's pushed through to a certain degree, then it sticks, and then you could use this as a lever arm and then get more torque. I just thought maybe that was something that's something that I would do, but then you'd probably have to make this out of better plastic and more rigid. I don't know, but little hole there as far to that corner as you can get, and think of the torque you could get on that. I think that would be a pretty good idea. But anyway, that's just what I would do. So marks out of 10 is a small compact item, and bear in mind, yes, there are other options like this. I would probably go for this, but in something that I can just drop off at people's houses or have in the car and say, yeah, look after that. Don't use it for, you know, opening jam jars and paint tins and things like that. Look after it, and when you give me these daft jobs, I'll be able to do them with a bit more sort of ease. And it's certainly a lot smaller and more compact than something like a TrailTrek Plus, which is more capable but heavier and bigger. And is that really EDC? Well, you know, unless you're, let's just Land of the Giants and you've got huge clown pants with huge pockets, probably not. Whereas that you could claim is more EDC. So I'm going to give it a 9. I think for what they're set out to do, it's very capable. I like the locking bits, decent bits, high quality, and very small form factor. And look at the profile on that, very small. Fits in my hand just, but I am a tall guy. So I'll give them a 9. Well done, Wera. Keep up the good work. But can you just make everything in Germany? Just something to think about there. Okay, so if you think I'm right or wrong, stick it down below and we'll have a good argument about it. Anyway, you get on with your day. Goodbye.